Welcome to the Live Full podcast, where we talk about all things faith, family, and living fully the life God wants for you. On today's very first episode, we're going to be talking about living fully and actually not settling in your life. And of course, my very first guest is none other than my husband, Chris. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here. Chris and I, we have 3 kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that I enjoy very much about our marriage and just our lives really is our conversations. And
Yeah,
so this was like a no-brainer for me. Of course, I was going to get you on as my first guest.
yeah.
And I thought, maybe people might like a peek into our conversations. What do
Yep.
you think?
Well, hopefully someone enjoys listening to
I
this.
hope so. I
Uh,
really
I
hope
I'm
so.
actually really excited because this podcast has been years in the dreaming
Mm-hmm.
for you and months in the making, and so I'm glad we're here and actually doing it and right here in our own home.
Yeah, we are recording like right in our own
Wow.
house, in our living room. Because yeah, we decided we'll just jump right in, studio or not. Let's do this.
Let's do it.
Let's do it, right? I think one of the things that I really wanted to do with this podcast was just marry a few of my passions together. One of which was just the idea of communicating. I love communicating. And I think it's not just about public speaking.
Mm.
I think I've discovered too that I enjoy being able to convey a message
Yeah.
in an effective way. And when people receive it and they feel like there was some kind of impact,
Mm.
that does something for me.
Yeah.
That was one of the keys or why I decided that this was something that I love. I also love learning. I love the idea of growing. I never want to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And when I listen to podcasts, right, I feel that way sometimes. I think that's my biggest takeaway. So something I really enjoy. I also believe in the power of stories.
Yeah.
I think we've talked about this many times before, but I love that stories have power. I
Mm.
love that stories have an impact.
Yeah.
And when you listen to them, you actually something in you can begin to change. You get inspired. You can believe for more. You can believe that maybe your situation is not all there is. And maybe there's more to life than what you know. And finally, because the title of this podcast is Live Full,
Live full.
actually, it came from John 10:10, one of my favorite verses in the Bible, where Jesus says that he came to give life and life more abundantly. And, we've talked about this many times too, but I've always believed, or this is my conviction, that if you know Jesus or you believe in Jesus, actually abundant life is available to you
Yeah.
to pursue,
Yeah.
to live out,
Yeah.
and to have in your life. And
Absolutely.
so I said, you know what, God, let me bring these things together. Let's do this podcast. Let's do this together.
No, it's good, and I think that's such a cool thing. When I
Yeah.
first, heard you bring up this idea of wanting to do it. Actually, I remember buying you a podcast mic.
Yes.
What was it, 7 years
I think
ago?
just before like the COVID years hit.
Yeah, and I was like, hey, babe, like I think you would love doing this.
Yeah.
Go do it. And life happened, and you couldn't, step into that. But I think now's the season.
Yeah.
And we're both. I mean, we are passionate about this. That we really believe in every area of your life you can live fully.
Yes.
I think sometimes our expectation of what life can be is just like too small.
Yeah.
Our vision
I agree.
about life is too small.
Yeah.
But God wants us to think big and look big and expect big things.
Yeah.
And hopefully, yeah, we get to talk about some of that today.
Yeah. I love that because I think even from a young age, I just always felt like that was the conviction that God gave me.
Mm.
Like, do I really just want to live like an average, mediocre life when what is promised to me is an abundant life? That I can live fully, I can live in that abundance of what God wants to give to me. And I'm not talking about just, merely like financially abundant, but there's so much more to that. I think when you feel like your life is abundant, actually it's beyond just a monetary like benefit. There's so much more. There is like a satisfaction, there
Mm.
is a contentment. I
Mm.
always say this, but it's true. There's a richness,
Yeah.
to your life that you
Yeah.
can't quite quantify in with money.
Yeah.
And you can't do that.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I mean, look, there's so many dimensions of
Yeah.
life. Your relationships, your work, your career. I mean, your ministry, family,
Yeah.
and in each of these things, It's not a, well, pick one at the expense of the rest.
Yes.
It's not, well, I'll be great in my career, but I guess my family has to suffer.
Yeah.
No, I think, like, look, life as a whole, you can really experience that fulfillment, satisfaction, walking in the center of God's purpose,
Yes.
I think,
I like that. Yeah.
and experiencing the full life that He's promised,
Yeah.
the promise that He's given to us.
Yeah, I do believe that it is important for us to believe that God has more for us in our lives and not just settle for where we're at. You
Mm.
know, when you talk about how, yeah, this is not enough, where
Yeah.
we're at, and you're not trying to be greedy. I don't think it's sometimes people feel kind of embarrassed or maybe shy to even ask for more because they feel like, am I asking too much? Especially in an Asian culture,
Mm.
I think sometimes you can you hold back because you feel like I shouldn't ask for too much. Maybe it's too much to ask,
Yeah.
and we treat God that way too.
Yeah.
When actually what God wants from us is no, ask and you will receive.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And He says in the Bible that He wants to give us exceedingly abundantly more than we can ask or even imagine.
Yeah.
And I mean that gets me excited because I really believe that's God's desire for us.
Mm. Yeah. So good.
Yeah, and I think about a few, like maybe we can talk about a few things in our own lives
Yeah.
that we have seen that,
Sure.
and hopefully that's encouraging.
Mhm.
I think about even our own, relationship and our journey,
Mm.
together. You like to laugh about this, but I had, was it 40 or 30 things?
31 things.
31.
Yeah.
I I did. I actually had a list of 31 things I wanted in my husband. And I was challenged by my youth pastor at that time to not settle,
Yeah.
to not lower my standards about
Mhm.
the husband that I was looking
Mhm.
for. And in a world where people might say, look, you're asking for too much.
Yeah.
In a world where people might say your standards are too high, don't ask for too much.
Mm.
I was challenged in faith
Yep.
to make a different decision.
Yeah.
I stuck to the 31 things,
Yep.
right? And there were random things in there. I mean, I remember one of them was would dance with old ladies. I don't know why.
Okay, this I don't remember. Really? Well, I
Okay,
don't know.
maybe other things like can sing in tune.
Oh, that one I can do. No
You
problem.
can do
Yeah.
that. Um, and I mean, there were other random things, but I think there were like maybe three or four non-negotiables that
Yeah.
I had, which we'll talk about maybe in another episode, not for today. But
Yep.
I think just the idea of saying I'm gonna stick to these things and not waver on them.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, I think the whole idea of faith
Yeah.
is that you're believing and you're expecting something that's not just the ordinary.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you got what you wanted, right? Your 31 things.
I would like,
I
yes,
remember. I
I did get what
remember.
I
I
wanted.
think it was only after we got married, like the wedding day or the day after or
Yeah.
something. You actually told me what those 31 things were, and I was like, "Well, check, 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 check." Like I fulfilled all of
Well,
those
I didn't
things.
want to spoil it because if I had told you what the 31 things were and you might try and, fit
Yeah.
into those category or into those like
Yeah. No.
standards that I had.
No.
So I decided, no, I'm just going to wait till like after we are married,
Yep.
then I'll let you know.
Yeah. No. I mean, even if it was 81 things, I mean, I would have met all of them.
Okay, very humble.
I
Yeah,
mean,
very
no, I
humble.
think this idea of faith, it's
Yeah.
like, hey, God, I'm believing you for beyond.
Yeah.
There's always a bit of that like uncertainty. Will it happen?
Yes.
Is there someone in this case who can actually fulfill all of those things?
Yeah.
And if that person doesn't, am I going to compromise or am I going to like stick to that?
Yeah.
And I think that idea applies in every area of our lives. Like,
Yeah.
God, I'm believing you that in my relationships, I'm going to experience like close, loving, authentic, genuine, friendships, my marriage, and all of those things. And like, God, I believe you in faith for it. And
Yeah.
like you said, it's not a selfish thing.
Yes.
Sometimes you can be greedy about
Yeah.
finances, you can be greedy about achievement, and you should watch those things. But hey, if what we're believing for or like having a vision for are things that are in line with the word of God.
Yes.
God, I want to, be an influence for you. God, I
Yeah.
want to do great things for your kingdom.
Yep.
God, I want my family to just be so tight,
Yeah.
be a model for. I mean, those are good things
Yes.
that I think like we can have faith for.
Yeah.
I think if we approach it with that, like I'm not just greedy, I'm not just ambitious, but God, I'm having faith because these are things that are good.
Yeah.
These are things that are in your design.
Yeah.
God, these are things that out of the overflow of that, like can bless people.
Yes.
I would say go for it.
Yeah. What would you say is maybe something helpful for those listening? How do you differentiate between like I want it for myself,
Mm.
right? I'm just trying to be greedy, like
Yep.
what you said,
Yep.
right? It's for my own like I don't know, like intention, for
Yep.
my own good,
Yeah.
versus actually saying, God, this is for you.
Mm.
Because I think sometimes the idea of living fully can be a bit of like a put off for people,
Mm.
because it does feel a bit like, why should I?
Yep.
How can I? Like,
Yep.
do I even deserve that? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe you can talk a bit about that.
Yeah. I think one, I go back to the word of God.
Yeah.
Uh there's a verse I think in Psalms that says, "Hey, delight yourself in the Lord, and He'll give you the desires of your heart." And part of like delighting in the Lord is like, God, the things that please you,
Mm.
the things that are in line with your design,
Yeah.
I'm going to like find pleasure and satisfaction in those things.
Yeah.
And I think the desire to live fully is a bit of like a pursuit for satisfaction.
Yeah.
But what is that satisfaction found in? Is
Yeah.
it found in the things of God?
Yep.
Or is it found in like material or things that maybe the world would pressurize you or encourage you to go and chase? So I think that's one. God, like, is the delight of my heart, in the things that, please you or things that are in line with your design. So I think that's one, like metric of it, one measure of it. And the other is like, I think just the general state of your heart. God, like, do I want to bless people?
Mm.
And what I find actually, just in my journey is that the more I found like fullness or fulfillment in the things that are maybe initially like for me, at some point, because my desire is God, I want to bless others.
Yeah.
I can use that to be an encouragement to people.
Yep.
So I'll give you an example. Like say
Yep.
in career, I say, hey God, I want to be excellent in these things. God, I want to be a good testimony for you in my workplace, and I do that. I'll work hard. God opens doors of like favor and opportunity.
Yeah.
But out of that, I think in my experience, you get a chance to encourage others,
Yeah.
maybe who are struggling in their career.
Yeah.
Even in the workplace, God has opened doors for me to like, minister and be a blessing to other people. But if you're gonna live like in a mediocre way,
Yeah.
no one's gonna come and be like, hey, wow, this is so cool. Like you're living mediocre. Like tell me how you do it. But
Yeah.
if
There's
it's
nothing
like
special about mediocre.
it's like, look, anyone can be mediocre,
I
but if
agree.
it's like, man, you are flourishing in this, like,
Yep.
how do you do it?
Yeah.
You're flourishing in your friendships. Like, man, tell me, like, how do you, how did you get to this place?
Yeah.
And you get to encourage others along, like, in the journey as well. So, you know, truly living fully, I think will have an impact on others.
Yes.
I think that's probably the best benchmark. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the life that God gives to us when we live fully,
Mm.
actually others will see, and maybe to others it looks like a life that they can envy,
Mm.
but to you actually you found something that you've thrived in, and you are present,
Yeah.
you are content.
Yeah.
You're not looking at other people's lives now and thinking, I want those things too,
Yeah.
and being unsatisfied, because you are right where you need to be.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and someone once like mentioned this to me, and I'm a pastor now. We've been in full-time ministry for
Yeah.
a few years. And someone once said this thing. They said, hey, sometimes people look at, say, pastors or people in ministry, and they really respect them,
Yeah.
but not many people want to be like them. And I was like, man, why not?
Yes.
Like if that life in ministry or whatever it is that you do, if that life can be a full life, if it can be a flourishing life in every area, everyone should say, man, I want to be just like you.
Yeah.
Man, I want to go down that path. I want to go down that because, like, you discover just that fullness that God has for you.
Yeah.
And it should inspire. I think it can be a role model, to people. And it should bring encouragement to everyone you come into contact with.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because and then let's talk about this a bit more, but
Yeah.
we actually came into full-time ministry maybe about
Six
five
years.
six years. So this is new. This
Relative, yeah, relatively new.
this is like kind of a new thing for us, right? I mean, we're not as, I think experienced as most people are.
Mm.
But I really like that you said that this is one of the first things we said to each other,
Yep.
actually. That as we came into being a pastor, why don't, I mean, let's make sure we live it out or like do this in a way that others would say, hey, I want to do what you're doing
Oh
too.
yeah.
I want to live the life that you live too.
Yeah.
And actually, like the life of a pastor can be something to model
Oh, absolutely.
and to desire.
Yeah.
Just like any other career or job. And I like that because it really changed my perspective too.
Yeah.
In the way that we would lead our family,
Mm-hmm.
the way that you would lead our family,
Yep.
lead us,
Yep.
even lead the ministries that we were entrusted with.
Yeah. No. I think I'm loving the season of our lives. I don't know. Should I explain? Maybe we can talk a bit like
Yeah, no. Okay, yeah, I think you should. As Chris mentioned, he just came into full-time ministry like 6 years ago. But let's talk about that journey a bit,
yeah.
because I think a lot of people ask,
Yeah.
why?
Yep.
Why did you make this decision?
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you know, I worked for maybe about 10 years in the civil service. Loved the job. Found it challenging, interesting, engaging, meaningful. I enjoyed the work, enjoyed the people, and in my mind, I was like, God, I could do this for a long, long time.
Yeah.
We were always involved in ministry,
Yes.
in lay ministry. We always had a heart for the church, for the
Yep.
Lord, and all of that, and yeah, just living that full life. I think like, hey, God, in my career, like I can do well, can make an impact, but hey, in ministry, we can build the church and build your kingdom, and all that was good. And then I think it was in 2018 that God spoke to me very clearly. I remember that weekend, and God just said like, hey, it's time for a change of season. Like,
Yeah.
leave your job, come into ministry. I remember we were in a meeting in church. I was on stage.
Yes.
I was playing the guitar,
I
and I
remember.
felt God speak to me, and then I texted you,
Yes.
and I think you fell off your chair.
Well, I was okay. I was sitting on the floor already
You were already on the floor, so see, God already
with the
prepared.
kids, with the kids.
God already prepared you. And that happened like just before COVID.
Yeah.
And God spoke quite clearly. And to me, um, I guess it was never really about, do I have a career, in the marketplace? Am I in full time
Yeah.
ministry? It was always just, God, what is the life you want me to live?
Yeah. I think that's such a good point
Yeah.
because can you only live fully if you are a full-time minister? Or can you also live fully when you are in the marketplace
Yeah.
or like wherever God has called you in your school,
Yeah.
wherever you're placed at home, like a stay-at-home mom,
Mm-hmm.
right? What, does that mean that you're not living your life fully? But
Yeah.
that's not true. Actually, you live your life fully when you are in the place that God has called you to be.
Yeah. No, I mean, it must be true because, I mean, what percentage of people are pastors?
Yes.
I mean, it's not a high percentage. Most people, that you're a teacher, you work in an office, you're an executive,
You're a civil servant.
you're a civil servant, all of those things. God's not called every person like into full time ministry.
Yep.
If not, I mean, where would the rest of the world like be, right? And
Yeah.
so whatever it is that God's called you to, like I think you should be able to live fully. And so my journey was a bit that way.
Yeah.
People would say, "Hey, come in, like come be a pastor." Well, I was like, "Well, if God speaks, I will,"
Yeah.
and He did. And so that's how we came into the ministry,
Yep.
full time living there, and it's been great. It's been quite the ride. I feel fulfilled. I see how God has brought together, our experience, and gifts and our heart, like for His kingdom, into this season that we're in, and I'm loving it.
Yeah. What are some like challenges that you faced? I mean, okay, obviously, it was great. We've now 6 years down the road, we have seen how God has been so faithful.
Yeah.
But at the time of making the decision,
Mm.
what would you say were some of the challenges
Yep.
that you had to overcome?
Yeah.
Or maybe there were none. I don't know.
No.
I
Yeah.
can tell you mine,
Yeah.
but
Sure.
there was. I know you have some. You probably had some too.
Yeah.
To overcome in order to make that kind of decision.
Yeah. I remember it was probably like a few months before I had actually left my old job and come in, and I was going through an executive coaching kind of session.
Yeah.
And at that time, I already made the decision. I was just working through like the transition out of my old job and coming into ministry. And the coach was talking to me, and she asked, "Hey, like, what are you leaving behind?"
Yeah.
And I could list a few of those things. The prestige of a career, kind of the financial like side of things,
Yep.
familiarity. I think with that world, and it was good to just process. And in the journey as God leads you into like different things, I think it's okay to be like realistic and objective of things that you leave behind.
Yes.
But the second thing that she asked me, I remember, which was so impactful, was this: as you leave these things behind, what are you making room for?
Yeah. That's good.
What new things are you making room for? And I began to like list those things down and think about them. I was like, well, God, I could commit my time fully now, like to the ministry.
Yeah.
I could commit my time fully to, ministering to
Yep.
people. I could come fully and be a part of what you're doing in the church. And as I began to talk about those things, I got excited because
Yeah.
and whatever the decision, someone's
Yeah.
going through, if we're going to pursue and say, God, I want to live that life that you've called me to be, sometimes it means leaving something behind. But I think we need to remember, hey, I'm actually making room. And if I never left those things behind, there will be no space in my life to step into that next level of fulfillment,
Yeah.
that next adventure,
Yeah.
right? That God is leading us into.
Yeah.
So, challenges, like for sure, as with any transition, but what really helped me is to just have that sense of God. Actually, there is something new that you're bringing in,
Yes.
and if I don't leave those things behind, right, I wouldn't be able to make room and to step into everything that He has for me. And if we hadn't made that decision, I don't think we'd be sitting here.
Absolutely.
you know, so there are new things that God's always leading us into,
Yeah.
and there are new dimensions of life that I think we got to perceive. I remember one of our life verses is in Isaiah 43,
Yes.
where God says, like, hey, behold, I'm doing something new.
Yeah. That's good.
Do you not perceive it? And sometimes we need to perceive, God, like, are you nudging me a certain
Mm.
way? God, are you speaking something? And sometimes we're just so caught up with what we're going through now that we're not perceptive.
Yeah.
We're not sensitive to what the Holy Spirit is saying. And the promise is that, hey, God's always doing something new. It says He's making streams in the desert and pathways in
That's
the
good.
wilderness. And I think so many of the steps or decisions that we've made, we're always saying, God, what is that new thing?
Yeah.
God, I want to step into it, and not being too wedded to the status quo,
I love
not
that.
being too stuck in what's already familiar. But God, I believe, man, there is that new frontier.
Mm-hmm.
God, there is that new ground that you're leading me into. God, there is this new experience. It might be different from what I've experienced. It probably won't be familiar. New things never are familiar,
Yeah.
but it's exciting, and I'm going to experience a new level of like fulfillment and satisfaction as I step into that.
No, it's true. In the Bible, God always does a new thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think maybe the greatest obstacle sometimes is we are too comfortable with where we're at,
Yeah.
right? You are too comfortable in a certain job. You're too comfortable in a certain type of life.
Yeah.
You're too comfortable in a certain type of schedule that you're
Mm-hmm.
used to.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe also coupled with a bit of fear,
Yeah.
right? If I step out,
Yep.
if I try this new thing, if I do something different,
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's on the other side of this new thing.
Oh yeah.
I'm not sure what am I going to face on the other side of this new thing.
Yep.
And that is scary.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's probably the biggest obstacle that I would say
Mm.
is possible. I remember when you first told me, actually I was pretty okay with it. I
Yep.
think somehow like God had already prepared me, and I didn't feel too shocked by it. I definitely didn't fall off the chair. Thankfully I was already on the
Yeah.
ground. And I said, yeah, let's do it. I mean, if
Yep.
it's God, like, I can't deny that.
Yep.
I know that it is Him. But one of my fears, just naturally as a mom,
Yeah.
was what about the kids?
Mm.
Like, are we, like what you said, like, do we have to give up these various things in our lives
Yeah.
now? Maybe even sacrifice like what the kids can have or what they can experience. What can we give to them?
Mm.
And that was my mindset. That was all I thought about,
Yeah.
you know. But I will never forget being in a service one day, and I was still struggling with this. And God said, I didn't bring you into this season to
Yeah.
take things away from you.
Yeah.
because that's sometimes how it felt.
Yep.
Like, God, you were taking opportunities, you were taking finances, you
Yeah.
were taking maybe even a season of our lives that I thought
Mm.
was, your career, right? It
Yep.
felt like that. But like, I felt like God challenged me to think of it in a different way. He says, no, like, I brought you into this season to show you what I can give to you.
So good. Yeah.
And I think when he said that, something in my heart like really shifted. And
Mm.
I started to think of things really differently,
Yeah.
because I was like, hey, God, I think a bit of what you're saying to making room,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Oh, actually, God, if you want to give to me, I need some space, right? I need some space in my
Yeah.
life for you to give to me and pour into me.
Yeah.
And sometimes maybe for us, that's the kind of perspective that we need to have too,
Yeah.
right? When we live fully, like, does it always mean that we must be comfortable?
Mm.
No.
Probably not, actually. Yeah.
Right? When we live fully, does it mean that things always go our way?
No?
Definitely not
Yeah.
too, but there's so much more than that. Remember when we made that decision to go into the mission field? Maybe we can
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit
Sure.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, missions, like missions was, this was earlier.
Yeah.
Uh, I came into full time ministry 2019.
Yes.
We made the decision to go to the mission field, committed a year. That was in 2013.
Yeah.
I think, we were married a year. And our heart was always to be in the nations. Our
Yeah.
church is, we
That
send
was one of
church
my
planting
31
team.
things.
One of the 31 things, which, I easily fulfilled, easily.
No, I think my 30, that was like, it basically said, has a heart for mission.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't know about that dancing with old lady. Like, we should go and relook that because I don't know. Um, but, that was 2013. We were
Yeah.
married a year. And we had always decided, yes, God, this is something that we want to do.
Yes.
You had gone for missions
Yes. When I was,
2009.
yeah, 20 years old.
You
Yeah.
were 20 years
Mm-hmm.
old. You had gone to Timor Leste.
Mm-hmm.
I had never been. I finished university. I was studying overseas. Came back, and then we had always planned like, hey, a year after marriage, like let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go to missions. And that had a bit of its challenge, struggle too. But we had just purpose in our hearts. Um, we said, God, I think this is your purpose for me. I think this is your
Mm.
time for me. And so I took a year off work.
Yeah, I did too.
You took a year off work as well. We both did, and we went. And I remember there were a couple of cool things. One was when I made the decision to go, um, the people around me in my workplace were like, "Why?"
Yeah. It's
You
an
know?
opportunity to
Yeah,
talk.
yeah. And I was like, "Oh well, let me tell you why."
Yeah.
And interestingly, the response of most people, and this was true even when I left my job and came into the ministry, the response of most people was like, "Wow, that's really cool."
Mm.
You'd be surprised. Sometimes in our minds, we're like, man, we're giving up something.
Yeah.
But the response that most people have, and this is not even like people in the church,
Yeah.
this would just be like colleagues and friends. They'd be like, dude, that is so cool. And one of the things they would say is, I wish I had that clarity of purpose.
I love that.
I wish I knew my purpose well enough that I could make some of these, what to them were radical decisions.
Mm.
Well, I'm taking a year off work, or I'm giving up a career and doing this. And I wish I had that clarity of
Yeah.
purpose. And I think it does come down to that.
Yeah.
Whatever path that we are on, God, am I clear about the purpose you've given to me?
Yeah.
And in this specific season, because things change, you've got kids now, the decisions you make are different, but the whole thing is, God, am I walking in your purpose?
Yeah.
Am I clear that this is your purpose for me?
Yeah.
And am I pursuing that?
Yes.
And then do I have the faith to say yes? I want to walk in that.
Yeah.
Because I think when it boils down to it, actually that's where the fulfillment comes from.
Yeah.
Just knowing, God, I'm living in the center of your purpose. And so that year in 2013 in the mission field, we were out in Mexico
Yeah.
for a year, speaking
Tacos.
Spanish, eating tacos,
Good years, good memories.
and all of that, and planting a church, and all of that. It was just so clear, like daily. It was like, okay, God, this is your purpose for me, and so I'll step out into it. And I think that among many, many other decisions, actually were just like stepping stones to the bigger decisions that we made in faith
Yeah.
later on in life. And part of, I think like even talking about living fully, I think that fullness grows.
Okay. Yeah.
It's not just like a one time, oh yeah, you've lived full now. No, actually it grows, right? I think there are always deeper and deeper levels of like satisfaction and fulfillment that God has, but it comes with increasing faith.
Yes.
It comes with decisions that are always pushing that boundary of like faith and the next thing that God is leading us into. And you think like, wow, I'm so satisfied now. I'll tell you, there is that next thing
Yeah.
that God has for you. I mean,
Yes.
I don't know what our next thing is,
Yeah.
but two things I can say. One, it's probably going to require more faith, which is like, wow, God,
Yeah.
another like faith thing. But secondly, it's going to lead to greater fulfillment.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things I do remember, even in that decision when we went for missions,
Yeah,
was I definitely remember a point where I almost had second thoughts about it.
I remember this.
Um, I was quite unsure. I
Yeah,
think the fear was overtaking me a bit. I was getting nervous about the decision because going overseas for a whole year, started to feel a bit scary,
Mhm.
started to feel very daunting to me.
Yep,
And I just remembered one particular sermon. So be in church because God speaks there.
he does. Yeah.
And the message was a very simple message. The message basically said, take a step of faith.
Mm.
So it wasn't like God's voice was, ringing in my head, like
Yeah.
loud and clear. Do this and you will not regret it.
Yeah.
It wasn't like that.
Mm.
It really was actually my step of faith first that I had to take. That I had to say, God, I'm going to take that step of faith.
Yeah.
I'm going to step out in that first and trust that even as I do this, actually, God, you're gonna show me,
Yeah.
like what that abundance
Mm-hmm.
looks like.
Yep.
Um, and so I think about that a lot because sometimes I feel like we're waiting for like God's voice to come into our heads,
Mm.
do this,
Mm.
do that right now,
Yep.
and then we are going to step out.
Yep.
But actually, sometimes it takes our step of faith first to say, okay, God, I'm going to take that first step, trust you.
Yeah.
There's something about that.
Yep.
God's looking for that heart. I'm going to take that step of faith first. And then, God, like, I'm ready to believe for whatever is ahead of
Yeah.
that, and what's on the other side of that faith.
Yeah.
And I think even in all these decisions, when we say, God, we want to live fully, we
Mm.
want to live a life that really has that abundance, speaks of that fullness.
Yeah.
We're not gonna like wait for like an instruction to come first, right?
Yeah.
We're saying, God, I'm gonna go get it.
Yep.
I'm gonna lay hold of it.
Yep.
I'm gonna believe that this is what you have in store for me,
Yeah.
and I want to live that out in my life.
Yeah. Um, we just came from a wedding this
Yes,
morning of a very like dear couple, and
we love
I
them.
was I was preaching there, and one of the things I was encouraging them in was, just put Jesus at the center of all
Yeah.
of your decisions, and you can make so many decisions in life, housing, finances, family, career, what to eat, like, and so on and so forth. And one of the things I said, and I think is so true,
Mm,
is hey, in every decision you make faith your main value.
yeah.
Because you're not always going to have 100% clarity of what comes after.
Yes.
Not every decision you're going to hear like a voice from heaven speaking to you.
Yeah.
We should press in for that and believe that God will speak. But sometimes you're just like, man, I'm not sure. And in those times, I would always say, hey, make faith your main value.
Yeah.
Like, what is the faith decision?
Yep.
What is the decision that's going to be like, God, I'm believing you for something bigger and greater? And make that faith decision. And I think you won't go wrong,
Yeah.
in line with His word, driven by faith. And I think that's the kind of decision and posture in our hearts that leads us deeper into the purposes of God.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, God's desire for us is actually what's the condition of our hearts?
Mm.
Where are our hearts? Our hearts is so important to Him.
Yeah.
More than what we do,
Mm-hmm.
more than the job that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, God, what is the posture of my heart?
Yeah.
Like what you're saying. Do I trust you? Do I believe? Can I surrender
Mm-hmm.
like some of these decisions to you?
Mm-hmm.
Those things really matter to God. And so, even as we, end this episode, maybe you can share just one thing, maybe one last thing you want to leave with, our listeners. What do you feel like makes you or helps you to live a full life?
Mm. I think this is maybe it's a little counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But there's a verse in the Bible that says, uh, if you try to gain your life,
Mm.
you'll lose it.
Yeah.
But if you lose your life for my sake, like you'll find it. And we don't usually talk about it in those terms, but
Yeah.
I think this idea of surrender is actually what leads us deeper and deeper to finding and discovering that full life God has for us.
Yeah.
And sometimes we try and chase it in our own way, but I think the more we can surrender to God, the more we can say, God, whatever you ask, my answer is yes.
Mm.
The more we can say, God, I'm willing to lay it all down for you. I think that actually is the path to discovering the abundant life that God has for us.
Yeah. That's so good. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. Hey,
Thank you for being on this first episode.
I love
Yeah,
it.
it's such a encouragement to me too, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And join us for our next conversation on how to live full for Jesus in